So in this lecture, we're now going to move towards our third and final category of electrophiles that react with alkenes. And this is category C, or electrophiles that react with alkenes through a concerted mechanism. And a concerted mechanism indicates that all of the bond forming and breaking processes occur in concert with one another, or there's one step in the mechanism, or a single transition state. So two groups that add to an alkene at the same time, or the same instance, must add to that alkene from the same face. In other words, they must end up cis to one another. If you add X and Y at the same time, X and Y will be either both on top of the alkene or both underneath the alkene in the product. Anything in category C is a net syn addition. So the first example is hydrogenation. And hydrogenation is also referred to as catalytic reduction, where catalytic refers to a transition metal such as palladium, platinum, or nickel, all of which are identical for your purposes. Reduction refers to the addition of hydrogen gas, which is going to allow us to increase the number of CH bonds. Adding hydrogens to carbon is known as reduction in organic chemistry. And you do not need to know how to push the arrows or how to draw a mechanism for anything in this category. The mechanism for this reaction